What is up, Ann Brothers? What's going on?
Oh, nothing. It's just, waiting for the eclipse. I'm like, oh, is it here yet? Is it here yet?
No, it's not.
Oh,
Yeah, we're getting down. We're getting funky. Getting ready for the eclipse. We're in that lull where you're just waiting for the moon to arrive, do what it does. So yeah, I know. It is. The good news is I believe we are well prepared for our eclipse adventure, which should be a good one. So we are less than 24 hours away from the totality, and we're going to talk all about the eclipse today. It's going to be amazing. So yeah.
I'm very excited about it.
I know. For those of you that may notice, my locale is a little bit different because I'm in the kitchen of my sister. I know. She's like 20 feet away. I know. Crazy,
right?
huh? So, but yes, my husband Joe and I are spending the night here, and then we are all taking off at the crack of dawn tomorrow to head down to Ohio.
Pre-crack
Pre-crack of dawn to head down to Ohio because we'll talk a little bit about the traffic that is going to exist tomorrow. And what you have to watch out for. So yeah, today is all about we're gonna eclipse hard today. There's like hard coaching. Well, today we are hard eclipsing. This is a crash course in eclipse lore, and not so much lore, but facts, why this is happening, and the fact that though it's rare, it's not that rare. Everybody's like, oh, it's this rare eclipse. I'm like, no, they actually happen a couple times a year. But it's all about right place, right time, and it just so happens that we've been really lucky here these last couple of years. So, which is completely and totally awesome. So we don't want to waste your time today. We know that you are excited to get to the content. So let's jump right in. Anne, would you care to handle the introductions today?
Oh, I would be more than happy to. So welcome.
Fantastic.
Welcome. If you're a new listener or just need a refresher, here's our synopsis. We're Anne and Janice brothers, the brother sisters. I know, right? We're in our 50s, which means that we are Generation X. That means we had cameras to take pictures. That's all they did was take pictures. You had to buy film for them, and then that film had to be developed someplace. Sometimes at places that only developed pictures. Remember, Jenny, like little development, like it was like a hut. You took your pictures there.
It was like a photo mat.
Yeah, exactly. And you always got double prints because it was the same price. So
exactly.
You're like, oh yeah, this way I can share pictures with everybody. Yeah, you really didn't. You just ended up with a lot of extra pictures that someday you have to throw away. And then you're like, oh, I don't know. Should I throw these away? I'm like, yeah, it's okay.
They end up historically they end up in a shoebox that you end up throwing away. So
exactly. So we talk about smart stuff, dumb stuff, fun stuff, or any combination of the three. Today is a very smart stuff oriented show. We are not cool, hip, or sexy. We know this because we started planning our 2024 eclipse trip while we were driving to our 2017 eclipse destination in Nebraska. So yeah. We're really excited about this. We're not a celebrity, influencer, or true crime podcast. If we were, it would limit all of the other stuff we want to talk about. So we like to talk about a variety of things. So that's why we can't be any of those other three. We've been told we're good to listen to. I'm sorry, what was that, Johnny?
I was just going to say, speaking of that last day, I was just going to interrupt you and talk about what Chip said about our show last week. So our friend Chip said our podcast is where you go to learn things about stuff.
He said every time he listens to our podcast, he learns something. So yeah, totally. We're going to teach a bunch of stuff today. We've been told we're good to listen to, as our new friend Bailey Sissoy Moore told us, while you're on a long car trip. So she downloaded a number of our podcasts so she could listen to them and get an idea of what kind of ladies we are.
Right. Smart ladies, dumb ladies, fun ladies. Yeah, that's what we are.
Yeah. Exactly. So this podcast is not G or PG or even PG-13. We may swear and we may say adult things. I mean, it's not guaranteed. We don't go crazy, but we are grown-ups, and grown-ups say swears and adult things.
Sometimes.
Join us on our website, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Like us, follow us, hit the bell. Give us your feedback, whether questions and answers and or polls, or you can ask Alexa to play us. We can't do that here because we don't have Alexa, but if we were at Jenny's house, we could say, Alexa, play the Brother Sister Smart Dumb Fun. Boom, right there.
I know coming back to your house is so coming over here is like so retro because you guys like, you know, like just do things like regular people. It's awesome.
It is. Jenny's like, do you have more electrical outlets in your kitchen? I'm like, no, we have two because our house was built pre-electricity. So we
Yeah,
have
you
a
have one of those.
definite lack of outlets in our home.
You have an older home. That's what we're gonna go with. I love it.
Yes, exactly.
All
It's
right.
mature.
Yes, your home is mature, like our content. I love it. All right. So we always like to, because our tagline is smart, dumb, fun. We like to talk about something smart or dumb or fun that happened this week. And if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and start off with that.
Please do.
Okay, so this week, my husband is a fan of a group called the Bygones, which is Allison Young and Josh Lee Turner. And so we actually got a chance to go see them the other night. They were over at Bell's Eccentric Cafe in their little auditorium that they have there. And I got to tell you, these kids can crush it. They are amazing. They're a duo. If you get a chance to see them, they're actually touring right now. In fact, Kalamazoo was the second stop on their tour. Just go to their webpage and look up Bygones, and they have all the tour dates on there. And I got to tell you, it is well worth your time. I think it was like tickets were like $15 or something like that, and it
Mhm,
was, they were really, really good.
mhm,
They got this excellent harmony. They're both fantastic musicians. They're very personable, and just this is their they have a YouTube presence, but I think they're gonna be much bigger than their YouTube presence moving forward because, I just think they're gonna catch on just by word of mouth. So,
mhm,
if you get a chance, and you wanna just be entertained with some really excellent they play, they have some of their original music, they do some oldies but goodies, and they're just fantastic. They just sound amazing, and you should go see them, The Bygones.
mhm.
There you go. Alright, and
There
now
you go.
you.
Okay, so my smart fun thing this week was actually we did this on Easter. My husband Duncan and I we did a big section of the Detroit River Walk. The weather was a little foggy, but it was in the high 40s. There was hardly any wind, so it was a really actually a nice day, and there was hardly anybody there. There's a few people walking their dogs and stuff, but we saw a pheasant.
Oh, that's awesome, on the
I
Detroit
know.
River.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, Detroit has quite the pheasant population because there's big swaths of area that's like open or abandoned land. So there's a lot of like you'll go into different stores and restaurants and coffee houses, and there'll be pheasant art on the walls or pheasant. Their names will, it'll be called the pheasant or something, and that's because Detroit has a very large pheasant population, and we got to see one of them on our walk. It's a great walk. It goes all the way past the Renaissance Center on one end and then all the way to the Belle Isle on the other. So it's an east-west walk right along the river. It's a great walk. It's
Isn't it
not
like s
terribly
5 or
challenging.
6 m yeah, it's like 5 or 6 miles long, isn't it?
I think it's 3 miles one way.
Okay. Alright.
So yeah, there's no hills, there's no inclines. We saw a freighter. So yeah, it was
It's
great.
awesome.
So if you're looking for something to do in Detroit, you can find parking. There's an area where you can park. If you're looking for something to do in Detroit that you want nature focused, Detroit Riverwalk also voted best river walk in the country by Newsweek.
Good job, Newsweek, because 'cause you're
Mhm.
right.
You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, they put a lot of time, energy, and money into developing that Riverwalk, and I think they're just gonna continue to develop it, I hope, because with
Hope
the
so.
opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge, that's gonna be, even I'd love to be able to walk down there too. So, we'll see.
I don't think you're going to be able to walk that far because once you get like kind of past that section of downtown, it gets very industrial and it's less fun.
Fine. All right. So as you know, tomorrow, Ann and I are going to see the second Great American Eclipse, and of course, this is kind of on everybody's lips right now because it's a cool thing. So we are going to give you a quick tutorial on eclipses, and we're going to talk about what it means to be in totality. So here in Michigan, we are looking at most places in Michigan will be in the 90% as far as the coverage, the lunar coverage of the sun. And we're going to talk about the difference between totality versus not totality, and the difference is massive. But we're going to dig into this. So this is sort of my thing. So I'm going to do most of the talking today, if that's okay with everybody. Hopefully it is. Okay. So here we go. Wait, wait. breathe, sip of beer.
Mm.
This is what am I drinking, Anne?
Um,
Duncan gave it to me.
it's a Pilsner, I know
Bit
that because Duncan's
it's
into it.
bit something, bit burner, bit burger,
Bitburger, that's it,
bit
Bitburger.
burger. Okay, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
Duncan's into
good.
Pilsners right now, so everything's a Pilsner.
Yeah. Okay, that was the only downside I had about going to Bell's is that their beer really has fallen off. I know I'm probably gonna get, stoned for speaking sacrilege, but I don't think Bell's beer is particularly good anymore. I think once Larry Bell sold out, I'm not saying he sold out. If somebody offers you a dump truck full of money, go get that money. But it's
Mhm.
just not as good.
Mm,
And Duncan, I think, would agree with me. So that was the only bummer was that they had inferior beer to drink at Bell's. But anyway, I digress. All right,
I was gonna
so
say
first off, you guys, let's
food was
define
good.
an eclipse. Yeah, the food's very good there, but that's except they committed the mortal sin of putting black olives on an olive burger question mark. Outrage. Yeah, anyway. So I'm all over the place right now. Okay, so by definition, an eclipse is when either the moon's shadow hits Earth or the Earth's shadow hits the moon. Look, I got a kitty with me. Hello, cuckoo. So there's two types of eclipses. There's a solar eclipse and there's a lunar eclipse. So the one that we are going to experience tomorrow is a solar eclipse. So, but before we talk about eclipses, I think it's really important that we talk about phases of the moon because they're related. If you don't understand what's going on with phases of the moon, then understanding how eclipses work is much more difficult. So we're going to spend a little time with that right now. All right, so let's talk phases of the moon. So phases of the moon means when you look up in the sky and you look at the moon, it's either a crescent shape or a half moon or a full moon or there's no moon at all. And that happens because, as you know, there's a relationship between the Earth, the moon, and the sun. So Earth revolves around the sun and the moon revolves around Earth. And if we're looking at the picture like you see here, you see sunlight coming from the right side of the picture, and right in between the sun and the Earth is our little tiny moon. And so the only reason that we see the moon at night or even in the day is because it's reflecting the sunlight off of its surface. So the moon does not generate its own light. So if there's no light shining on the moon, technically you can't see it at night because it just shows this, it's just in shadow. So the fact that we can see the moon at all is because it's reflecting the sunlight off of its surface. Um, Now, how much of that sunlight we see depends on the position of the moon relative to its position around the Earth and its relative position to the sun. So, you with me so far? Of course you are. All right. So, as the moon moves around its orbit of Earth, we see progressively more and more of the moon because it has to get out of its own way. So, for instance, when we were looking at this last picture, the position that the moon is in right here, where it's sitting directly between the sunlight and Earth, is new moon. And essentially, what's happening there is we can't see a new moon because it's like if you've got somebody backlighting you and your face is in shadow, that's because all of the light is shining on the back of your head. That's kind of how a new moon works. So, like I said, as the moon, moves in its orbit around Earth, it sort of gets out of its own way, and we can start to see a little bit of light, and then a little more, and then a little more, until finally we get to full moon. So, as you can see in the picture we have on this next slide, we have the moon in its position. It's moving in the direction of the red arrow, so kind of up and to the left, as you see in the picture here. At this position, so this is days. So the moon cycle is a little bit under 28 days, and it's essentially 29 days between new moons. So you can see, so day one of any lunar cycle is new moon day, and we technically can't see the moon on that day because it's blocking itself. Day two, we start to see what we call a waxing crescent. So the waxing crescent phases are days 2 through 7. And what happens is that we see a little tiny sliver, and then progressively, those first 7 days, that thing gets bigger, that crescent gets larger and larger and larger until we get to day 8. And in day 8, we have what we call our first quarter moon. People, they call it a half moon. Fine, if that makes you feel happy, but technically, it's your first quarter phase. So if we're looking at the sun, it would be like the phase that would be kind of right off if you stick your left hand out, that's kind of your first quarter phase. And you can see the position of the moon right there. Okay. Then once we get past our first quarter phase, we start to see more than half of the moon. So this is what's called our gibbous phase. And gibbous phase is basically 9 through 14 days. And again, we see progressively more and more and more of the moon until we get to day 15. And there it is. This is a full moon. The scientific reference for the full moon is your second quarter because it's in your second quarter position. So in this position, we can see all of the moon because it's facing full on to the sun at this point. And so at this point, we have the sun, and then we have Earth, and then we have the moon behind it. And the reason I'm talking about this is because if you're going to have an eclipse, the moon has to be in a particular position in order for that to happen. And the positions that it needs to be in, it needs to be in either new moon position or full moon position, like we see in the picture right here. So after full moon or second quarter, then we start to go through the waning gibbous phases, meaning that we're going to start to see less and less. So we have a full moon on day 15, and then we start to see less of the moon on day 16, and then 17, and then finally on day 22, we get to third quarter, which is a half moon, but now the lighted part is on the other side. And then if we go through days 23 through 28, we go back after third quarter, we go back to the crescent phase, but our crescent starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then until eventually we get back to new moon. Exciting, isn't it? I know, you still awake over there? Of course you are. Okay. So, like I said, what's important about understanding phases of the moon and eclipses is that there's only two possible days in a lunar cycle where you could have an eclipse. And you can see them that these are lined up. So, the picture on the left here is showing you the new moon phase, which is when we would have a solar eclipse. And the picture on the right is showing you the full moon phase in which we would have a lunar eclipse. Now, one of the things I said is that you have these 2 days of the month where all 3 of them are lined up: moon, sun, and earth. And I say that they're kind of sort of lined up because they're not in an exact line. Because if they did, we would have an eclipse every month, which would be amazing. Or would it? Would that be amazing, or would we just be bored with it by then? We'd probably just be bored. So, and the reason we're not completely lined up is because of the angle of Earth's orbit. So Earth's orbit is actually, so when the moon is revolving around Earth, it's not doing though in a single straight plane. It's actually tilted to 5 degrees. So that's a really big deal, and it's enough information, it's enough tilt so that we we don't get eclipses every month. Okay. So for those people, my students ask that question all the time. Well, if this is the case, how come we're not eclipsing every month? It's this little 5 degree tilt, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you consider that, these celestial bodies are about 93 million miles apart, it's significant. Okay, so this is what we know. We know that an eclipse is either Earth or the moon blocking sunlight and casting a shadow. Eclipses are named based on who's getting blocked. So a solar eclipse means that the moon is blocking sun from Earth. A lunar eclipse means that Earth is blocking sunlight from getting to the moon. Okay. Tomorrow, what we will experience is a solar eclipse. It only happens at new moon. And like I said, it doesn't happen all the time. So here's the anatomy of a solar eclipse. So we're going to throw some vocabulary at you right here. So we're looking at this picture. We have the sun casting its light or casting its energy. That energy reaches Earth. Our moon needs to be in its new moon position, so between Earth and the sun. And the way the sunlight falls and hits the moon, it casts essentially two shadows. The first is what's called an umbra. This is the shadow. This is the deeper, darker shadow. And this is the one that will cause the solar eclipse. Now, what you can see in the picture is that shadow, kind of triangulates down. As that shadow comes down, it casts a tiny, tiny little dot of a shadow um, across Earth's path. That's why solar eclipses feel so rare, because that umbra, that area where you'll experience a totality, by the time it gets to Earth, is really tiny compared to the rest of Earth. The other shadow is what we call a penumbra. And that's a shadow that's casted out from how the sunlight hits, the sun angle hits the moon. And it casts a little bit wider net as far as a shadow. But this is the area that will experience a partial eclipse. So tomorrow, if you are in the state of Michigan, you will not experience the umbra. You'll experience what's called the penumbra, which means we'll get about I think in the Kalamazoo area, we're talking about 97% coverage, which is really impressive. It's going to be a cool eclipse. And we'll talk about in a little bit why it's not super cool. All right, so you have a couple of different solar eclipse experiences, and I've added a little picture here. So if you happen to be watching and you can see the picture, the one on the picture on the left shows a partial eclipse, which is what Michigan will see tomorrow. It's going to be a bitchin' partiality because, like I said, you'll get about 97% coverage, which is sweet. It's going to be really great to look at. Um, you have something in the middle. This is called an annular eclipse, and an annular eclipse happens when you have a solar eclipse but because, the moon's orbit is not a perfect circle, it's what's called an ellipse. Just about all of the planets have an elliptical orbit. It's sort of an ovalish it's not super oval, but it's oval enough so that there are certain points when the moon is orbiting Earth that it's a little bit farther away, and as a result of that, you don't get total 100% coverage, though the moon goes in front of it. You still have this awesome ring of light to the tune you still are about 99% covered, but you don't get a totality there. So they just had an annular eclipse in, God, what was it? Late last year in Australia. It was either Australia or it was South America. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but that was an annular eclipse. And so though it's cool, it's not quite as cool as a totality. Now, eventually, every eclipse, every solar eclipse that we ever have eventually will be annular because um, the Earth is slowly but surely moving away from Earth to the tune of about 3 centimeters a year. So um, we know this because the astronauts that, in fact, did go to the moon, they placed mirrors there. The Apollo 11 astronauts did that. They placed mirrors on the moon so that we could bounce lasers off of them and bounce light off of them and calculate how much the moon is moving away from us. It's about 3 centimeters a year, and that's not surprising because it's had escape velocity the whole time, but gravity, and all of that. So kind of keeps it close, but it's sort of a tug of war, physically speaking. Like that's not a great way to put it because that's not really what's happening, but it kind of is. So anyway, you really want to be in a totality because totality rocks, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so on the other hand, lunar eclipses, we actually experienced a lunar eclipse 2 weeks ago, and that is not a coincidence. We'll talk about that in just a second. But lunar eclipses only happen at the full moon, and that's because you have to have that moon in its full moon position in order to experience a lunar eclipse. Okay. Again, your anatomy of a lunar eclipse, the difference there's many differences between solar and lunar eclipses, and one of them is the time. So, like tomorrow, if you happen to be in the totality of the eclipse tomorrow, you might see 2 to 4 minutes of totality. And again, it's because that little tiny shadow is small and it's moving very quickly across the surface of our planet. With a lunar eclipse, those tend to last an hour or over an hour, and it's because if when you look at the picture here, you can see that the umbra of a lunar eclipse is much larger because the Earth is much larger than the moon, and it casts a much larger shadow. So if you happen to see a lunar eclipse, if you catch it at the beginning, you can sit there and watch its full lunar eclipseness for a good hour while it sits in the umbra. And I've actually been able to see a couple of really fantastic lunar eclipse totalities. It's pretty sweet. So again, you guys, that full experience as far as lunar eclipses, a total lunar eclipse, this is when the moon is in the Earth's umbra and you get this sort of red color, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The second picture is a partiality. This is where the moon passes into not it's kind of umbra, penumbra sort of thing. Now, the reason that a lunar eclipse is red is because the Earth's atmosphere is filtering the longer. So, if you're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum and you're looking at visible light, red wavelengths tend to be much longer than your blue and green wavelengths, and Earth's atmosphere is particularly good from that particular angle at filtering and scattering um, uh, um, the shorter wavelengths and allowing the longer wavelengths, the red, to pass through, and that's what ends up getting projected onto the moon. So that's why it's red during a lunar eclipse. Okay, so that question again of do we have eclipses every month? And the short answer is no, we don't have eclipses every month. It's that 5-degree angle that makes a difference. So then you might be asking yourself, well, why do we have eclipses at all? So what you need to understand about eclipses is that it's not an every month thing. It turns out to be a couple of times a year thing. So when the moon so what you're looking at in this picture is the different planes of sunlight versus Earth's orbit versus the moon's orbit, and they all kind of have to line up at just the right place at the right time. So about twice a year, you get these little spots, whereas the moon orbits around Earth, that they're in a sort of perfect plane alignment, meaning that they're in just the right spots, that they're in that spot where they share a plane. And like I said, that happens about twice a year. Here's the rub with that, is that you those are the points where you could have an eclipse because they're in the same plane, and at this point, the you're in good shape for the Earth to block the moon or the moon to block the Earth. But it doesn't happen all the time because not only do you have to be in the right node space, but you have to be in the right phase space as well. So if you line it up right, if you get into that spot where you're gonna be not just in the correct lunar node spot, but also the correct lunar phase, that's when you end up getting eclipses. Now, here's a fun fact that solar and lunar eclipses, they will share the same lunar cycle, meaning that if you have a lunar eclipse, it means somewhere on the planet, 2 weeks later, you're gonna have a solar eclipse as well. Now, that sounds great. You're like, yeah, all the time, solar eclipses for everybody. The problem is, again, it's really lunar eclipses. If we happen to be in the umbra, the whole planet's going to get to see that because the entire moon is plunged into that umbra. With solar eclipses, it's not so easy because again, we're dealing if you're looking at the picture I have here, you can see how tiny the little dot is where that umbra is. So that's that little umbra that does its moving either, across this particular picture is representing the totality that happened in 2017. So that little tiny dot just kind of works its way all the way across the continental United States. But again, you know, eclipses have been happening for millions of years. It's just that, for the longest time, there was nothing to see. There was nothing to see it. So it's that whole thing, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? Okay, well, if there's no one to see the eclipse, does it cast a shadow? And the short answer is technically yes, scientifically yes. So what you're looking at in this picture, you're looking at eclipse paths from the last, say, decade or so. And as you can see, they're not very wide. For instance, the path that we're going to have tomorrow at its widest point, I want to say it's about 115 miles wide. So you have this 115-mile path that's cutting its way, through Mexico, through Texas, up through the central United States, through Ohio, New York, and then out through Canada and Maine. So it's one of those things that not only does not every place get to see a totality, it's just again, not every solar eclipse results in a totality. So again, it depends on the node space and the phase of the moon. Is if you're looking at this, so like for instance, look at this December 2020 eclipse. You got large swaths here that are cutting through either the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean. So you may or may not get a chance to see those. It's just it really is solar eclipses are very much about kind of about dumb luck. So, and do you have any questions so far? And do you have any questions so far?
I'm sorry, I had my mic muted. I have no questions so far. I do kind of know this myself,
I
but
know.
it's nice to get a refresher.
Very good. Okay. I left off with something else. What was I talking about? Oh, I don't remember. Oh, there he is. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the idea of totality. So um, I've been trying to convince my students. My students are convinced that there's really nothing to see. We're going to be at 97%. It's fine. I've been trying to talk these my students into talking to their parents into like, hey, make them take you to the eclipse. It's going to be amazing. And so what I have here is sort of a representation of what totality looks like versus what 90% look like. So for instance, and this is a representation of that. This is sort of what it's going to look like this week if you're in Boston versus Stowe, Vermont. So Boston's going to max out at about 92%. So that's what your sky is going to look like at 92%. You're going to be able to see the eclipse. You're going to see a large portion of the sun being covered by the moon, but you're still going to experience what's essentially full daylight. It will be a little bit darker. The sky will be kind of a funky blue. It'll be like you're going to think like your eyes are messing with you because it's like somebody turned down the dimmer switch on the world. Okay. And that's what happens when you're in a totality, and then all of a sudden, somebody just shuts the lights off. It's like somebody flips a switch, and you get to see that diamond ring effect, and then you see the corona just bust out, and then it's just full on dark. It's kind of weird. One of the cool things about seeing the eclipse in Nebraska in 17 was that you could see the entirety of the horizon around you, and it's like somebody was just holding this big ass umbrella over the because you could umbra is the correct word for it because it's like an umbrella just sitting over you, and you can see the very horizon is still light, and you look up, it's this really cool dark weird sort of blue, and of course, you can see the corona, which is the only time humans get to lay eyes on the corona for real is when it's in that totality position. So it's just understand that we're going to see if you happen to be in Michigan or if you happen to be in the penumbra area, but outside of the totality, you're going to have a cool experience. Enjoy it. Use those eclipse glasses, but it is not the same as a totality. So I'm going to encourage people that if you have the gumption to go find you some totality.
I don't know if
Okay,
I want them to find totality because I don't want them to mess with our traffic, or take my space. So it's
I understand.
92% is great. Enjoy. Stay where you are.
This public service announcement brought to you by Anne, whose Stay the Hell Home campaign for the eclipse. So it's funny, I don't know. So we went to the eclipse, and like I dragged my sister to the eclipse in 2017 because I really, really, really wanted to go. It had been on my radar for a couple of years. I had already made hotel reservations, and I'm like, come on, Anne, it'll be fun, it'll be fun, it'll be fun. So she did go, and she thought it was pretty cool, but
I did.
really wasn't on as many. It feels like this eclipse feels like it's really on people's radar compared to 2017. And it was, in 2017, it was pretty crazy. But there are a bunch of weird ass conspiracy theories about this eclipse on the internet. And I don't know. I'll talk about that more in just a second. But okay, I wanted to address these, even though I feel like I shouldn't, but I'm going to. All I can say to start with is just calm the fuck down. Okay. We literally did this 6.5 years ago. We literally had a totality that crossed America and it was fine. Traffic is going to be nuts in the path of totality. Okay. So be cool. Give yourself a lot of extra time. You can probably plan on doubling your travel time home, just so you know that. Cell service is, there's been lots of talk about how you should have food and water. Your cell service will be interrupted. That's not the eclipse that's causing any of this. It's the fact that you are moving a humongous number of people all to a very narrow place, and we're going to be just stressing out these poor cell towers. And it's like all of a sudden, cell towers that usually service like 100 people are going to be servicing thousands upon thousands or even millions of people. States of emergency are being declared not because we think the sun is going to come crashing into the earth or the moon's going to fall out of the sky. It's just, Buffalo is going to have 1 million people in it tomorrow. Buffalo doesn't have 1 million people in it. It's not really equipped to have 1 million people in it. And this week, it's going to have 1 million people there. It's going to have 1 million people running there today and tomorrow, and then it's going to have 1 million people trying to run out of there today and tomorrow because they got to go back to work on Tuesday. So, just so to give you some perspective, the last migration was literally the largest migrations of humans in the history of humanity. So when you consider all of the migration that's ever taken place, this event in 2017 was the largest migration of people ever. Tomorrow, it's going to be even more because this is going to be the last totality we have in the continental United States until 2000, I think 45, just 44 or 45. I can't remember which one. So people are jazzed and excited about it, but a lot of people want to see this. So all I can say is, be cool, bitch, be cool. Tell that bitch to
Another thing to
chill.
keep in mind too is in the last eclipse, it took place in more remote parts of the United States, and this one is actually happening in a much more there's a lot more people where this totality is going to be happening. So there's a lot more people who will be able to travel. Instead of traveling, a day's drive away, they can travel just an hour, maybe a couple hours. So that's another reason why there's probably going to be a lot more traffic. So just relax, chill, hang out for a little bit maybe after the eclipse. You don't have to jump right into the car as soon as the totality is done. The totality is short, but the eclipse itself is pretty long. You'll still be able to see the moon leaving, the sun and from blocking it. So that's also pretty cool too. So, just relax. Maybe take Tuesday off too if you can.
And we actually bought 2 boxes of Little Debbie's, one for the pre-eclipse and one for the post-eclipse. So, yeah. So
Mhm.
stop, get yourself some Little Debbie's. It'll help. Okay.
Exactly. Stop for ice cream.
Indeed. All right, let's talk about safely viewing the eclipse, shall we? Okay, there's a lot of misconceptions about this as well. This is conversations I had with my students all last week. They had lots of questions about this, which is good. I'm super glad they were curious. I feel this tiniest little bit of guilt that I'm not leading my class in some sort of eclipse activity, but that means I would have to be there instead of going the totality, and I don't want to do that. So I didn't. All right, sorry. All right, so the only time it is safe to look directly at the eclipse is during totality, meaning that there is 100% of lunar coverage. And that happens for about 3 minutes. That's it. If you are not in the totality, if you are not in that umbra, don't be looking at that eclipse without your eclipse glasses. Okay. There's no percentage of lunar coverage under 100% that is safe to view without your eclipse glasses. Now, one of the things I want you to remember about your retinas, which are going to take the brunt of the damage from that, is that you don't have any nerve cells in your retinas. So you don't know if you're doing damage. You are, because when you talk about electromagnetic spectrum, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum and the wavelengths of those, the amount of energy in UV and X-ray and gamma ray, you are above that spectrum that the cells in your eyes can deal with. So when you're looking at visible light kind of on down, that have significantly less energy, your cells are like, yeah, man, I can do that, but they can't do UV up through gamma rays. So as a result of that, you don't want to be staring at the sun, even if it's 99% covered, because that's a testament to just how much energy we get from the sun. We get a bunch. Okay. So just so you understand, you need to be wearing eclipse glasses, not sunglasses. Sunglasses are not eclipse glasses. They're not even close. On your best day, a good pair of sunglasses, you're not going to be able to look directly at the sun without doing damage to your eyes. Don't do that. Just so you know, many retailers right now are selling eclipse glasses. I was at Menards this morning, 99 cents, a big old rack of eclipse glasses. So, tomorrow when you get up in the morning, you got plenty of time on your way to work, stop and, go get some eclipse glasses for 99 cents. And it is fun to look at. It's interesting. It's cool. It's one of these things that you have an opportunity to see it. And like I said, totality is super special. So I highly recommend that you go in, that you have a look, and yeah, just understand that this is an event that's I don't know, it's to say that it's special is an understatement. So as far as where we will be eclipsing in Ohio, and specifically we're going to an area that's about, I don't know how many, it's right on kind of Lake Erie-ish, not quite
Yeah,
Sandusky, not quite
it's on
Toledo.
Lake Erie. We won't be able to see Lake Erie from where we are because it's very wetland, lots of trees. It's a cool wildlife refuge. Duncan and I have gone. We've been there probably a dozen times, and it's just I figured if we do not get to see the eclipse because of cloud cover, then at least we'll be in a really beautiful place.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
So yeah, so as far as, so like I said, we're going to be at Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, just outside of Oak Harbor, Ohio. And as far as the weather tomorrow, we're going to be in that zone of very much, we're basically 50-50. So whether we're going to get clouds or sun, and that's kind of what you do. You go and you take your chances, and that's kind of part of the fun, is that it's kind of a roll of the dice. Weather forecasts right now are saying the East Coast is probably the best place in America. They're going to be under high pressure. So like Vermont, Maine, those places, the East Coast, Canada, they're looking super sweet for some really great viewing. Right now, the one that's in the most danger is Texas, and they their forecast does not look good. But like I said, where we're going to be in Ohio, it's 50-50, baby. So, and again, it's one of those things where you go, you have an experience, you have some fun. And like I said, we picked a spot that we felt is really good so that we can still have an enjoyable nature experience regardless of whether we get to see totality or not. And I have to admit, it helps that we got to see the totality in
Mhm.
Nebraska. And honestly, we got pretty lucky that day as well. We kind of had a 50-50 day for that, and it ended up just being crystal clear and just a gorgeous
Mhm.
day. So crossing our fingers, let's
Fingers
go.
crossed.
Fingers
If we're
crossed.
gonna have an eclipse, early April in the Midwest is not great for us. It could snow. You never know. It's early April. It could snow here. It could rain. It could be nice. It's when Jenny told me, she's like, yeah, it's in April of 2024. I'm like, oh, April's not a good month for that.
I know, actually, it's supposed to be nice and warm tomorrow. They're talking 70 degrees, breeze out of the south, and the wild card there is always, whenever you're that close to a Great Lake, that sort of is your crapshoot wild card about what your weather's going to be like, and
Mhm.
that's okay because you know it's just
It's
about
all
trying to
part of the
go and
fun.
have the experience. It's nice. We have lots of Eclipse snacks, and we're going to be hanging out with some friends. It should be a good time.
Mhm.
So one way or the other, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll have a good time.
Is
We're easily
is
amused.
Duncan bringing Bitburger with him tomorrow?
I think he's going to be bringing like some of his beer from work, but
Hey, looks good too.
mhm.
He makes good work. Ooh, we have a comment. Let's see what our
Cool.
comment is. It's Tracy Larson for Clear Skies in Indianapolis. Okay. Tracy Larson, that's right. I knew you were eclipsing. Uh, I think Indianapolis is in the green. Let me see. Okay, hold that thought. Michigan Storm Chasers put some stuff out. Let me look for them real quick. Michigan Storm Chasers is one of our super friends, and I'm just gonna
Mhm.
look them up real quick.
Yes, if you would like to hear our interview about with the storm chasers, you can look into our archives. As Jenny and I have enough
Excellent.
shows right now to have archives, and we have an
I know.
excellent show with interviews with their 5 founding members. So yeah, we
Indeed.
they're our buddies.
So anyway, I'm just gonna project this real quick. We're gonna
Mhm.
share this tab right here. Hopefully everybody can see this. Oops. There it is. Okay. So this is the Michigan Storm Chasers forecast map for tomorrow. The green, this is the best chance for clear skies and minimal cloud cover. So if you are in Indianapolis/Ohio, you are looking pretty good, Tracy Larson. So Indianapolis is squarely in the green according to the Michigan Storm Chasers. We are in that northern spot in Ohio where they're kind of getting some yellow over there. And this map, this is their 4-hour-old map. I think this is their last map until tomorrow. So, yeah, looking pretty good for some solar eclipse weather if you
Mhm.
happen to be in Indiana. So yeah, high clouds clearing was the forecast earlier. I think you're going to be in business because there's a really large, what you're looking at as far as weather. There's a really large cold front. Actually, I take that back. There's a warm front in a system that's moving through right now, and that's why we are under cloudy skies here in Michigan right now. But
Mhm.
that thing is hauling ass right now. So they're saying it should, rain tonight, rain tomorrow morning, and then maybe be on its way out by mid to late afternoon. So we'll just have to wait and see. Everybody do this. Oof, oh, let's
Blow it out.
go. I know.
Mhm.
I know. And we haven't what's been nice about this eclipse for us this year is that we haven't had to do as much planning. I mean, we put in a lot of work to get into Nebraska and seeing that eclipse. So, the stakes just felt so much higher because we had done so much planning and traveling, and the stakes don't feel quite as high as this one
Mhm.
because we're fairly close to home, which is nice. And it's
Yeah,
like,
we didn't have
yeah,
to get hotel reservations 18 months in advance. That was nice.
correct. Oh, you want to hear what this ghetto place is doing in Buffalo? So
Oh.
one of the hotel chains in Buffalo, oh motherfuckers, man. So you have people that have made reservations like 18 months ago. And
Mhm.
this I can't remember which hotel it was, canceled a bunch of those extended reservations so they could sell the rooms to people for a higher price.
Oh,
Fuckers.
rude.
Yeah, so rather than honor those reservations where people were getting a better price, they canceled the reservations, and then people that were last minute booking and paying through the nose to get the
Yeah.
hotel rooms. I'm like, there's a special place in the bad place for people like that do shit like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Pick, I remember when you were making reservations for us in Nebraska, and they're like, "Yeah, we have all these people calling to make reservations for that day. What's going on?" Like Eclipse, they're like,
Nothing.
"What?"
What's the eclipse? I'm like, well, I'm glad you asked.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
That's hilarious.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna go back to this tab because Oh man, we had a quick show today, but I got so excited I couldn't stop talking. No,
I know.
no.
It's
So
it's super fun stuff.
it is super fun stuff. Well, the good news is we can go ahead and take our sneak peek to next week.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm. I have
action.
opinions, Jenny Brothers,
I
all
do
the
too, and
opinions.
yes, and I might have expressed some of those opinions in this picture hmm,
Mhm.
using mathematical symbols.
Oh, very good. Crocodile.
Yeah,
The crocodile is eating the greater than.
that is correct. That is correct. That is what was that second grade that we learned? That was that third grade.
I can't
I
remember.
don't
I just
remember.
remember I'm like, "Okay, I get that."
Yeah, I'm like,
That makes sense.
crocodile wants to eat what's good.
Exactly. Eats the bigger thing.
hmm
Yes, so we have our we'll be talking just a little bit about Roadhouse, both 1 and 2 or whatever, because they were I mean, the first Roadhouse is terrible, but, it's 1989, we know better. I shouldn't be giving more away, but let's just say we're gonna be talking about other action movies as well. Better
Yes,
action movies,
yes. So we're
much
gonna have our
better.
definitive. We're gonna have our opinions and musings about the original Roadhouse and the remake of Roadhouse that was just released last month on Prime, and we're gonna offer you a list of alternatives, which of things might that you might action movies that you might find more enjoyable. And yes, we will have our super special guest, entertainment expert Chip Maley will be with us next week to talk about action movies.
Mhm.
It should be a blast. So
Yeah.
and
He's already given us his top 5, and I have to admit, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that
yeah,
one." So, yeah, it's
yeah,
already
there's
banging.
some. It's completely and totes banging.
Mhm,
So yes. So we'll be back next week, looking at Sunday for sure, where we're gonna be talking about, we're gonna have an action-packed show,
mhm.
literally. But in
Okay.
the meantime, you can support the Brother Sisters for absolutely free. A great way to support us without having to drop even so much as a dime. Just find us on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon. You can play us on your Alexa.
Mhm.
I don't know if we're on Google Podcasts yet. We're getting there. Does Google even have podcasts? Now I'm
I don't
gonna
know.
have
I
to investigate that.
I
So,
guess we'll have to find out.
uh, yeah, and you can listen for free. It doesn't cost you a thing. You might have to listen to some commercials because Spotify and all those guys do that. But
Mhm.
put the word out. Tell your family and friends. Like us, follow us, subscribe. Um, like I said, tell them to share. Go to our website, look at stuff, do stuff. And remember, we have a new slogan: "Brother, sister, smart, dumb, fun," where you will learn things about stuff. That was Chips, by the way. Chips said that should be our slogan, and he's not wrong.
He's
So
not wrong. He's not
he's
wrong.
not wrong.
I also want to mention, remind people that we will be live on Facebook tomorrow with updates of our Eclipse activities. So if you are on Facebook, we'll be on YouTube too, Jenny, or just Facebook?
We will be Facebook living. So yeah, we
Facebook
won't.
Live. Hmm.
Yeah, we'll be doing the Facebook live. I don't know. I could probably do YouTube live. I can figure out how to do that tonight too.
Yeah,
Whew, all right.
yeah. You don't
Hey,
have to.
you know what time it is?
What
It's
time is
time,
it,
man.
Jenny Brothers?
It's time for our outro music.
Awesome. Thank you
There
again,
it.
Caselli, for this awesome outro music.
Yeah, Ellie is
My cat loves it.
this.
My
He made
cat
us.
Cuckoo's behind me. He's taking a nap during this. He just
I know.
loves it.
I
Look,
see him.
gotta get my finger going the right way. There it is. Oh, there he is.
Nice. That's right. You've been listening to the Brother Sisters Smart Dumb Fun, where you learn things about stuff every week.
Thanks,
That's
Betsy.
right. I'm Janice Brothers, and with me is.
Jan Brothers. We'll see you tomorrow.
That's right, you guys.
You know,
We will see you tomorrow from Ohio. We'll start broadcasting early in the day. We will be going through totality and all that sort of good stuff. Peace and out.